Hi, this is Jim Janossy. I thought I would start this slide set a little bit differently by giving you an overview by looking here at the slide sorter. So now I'm going to actually start the lecture by going into slide 1 and starting this slide set moving. So here in chapter 3 of the Gombrich textbook, The Story of Art, we're going to be talking about Greece around 700 to 500 BC. This is considered early in Grecian history. Here's where Greece is located around the Mediterranean. I've shown you this map earlier. Previously, we looked at Egypt here, and we looked at the Middle Eastern civilizations here. Now we're looking at Greece in this area of the Aegean Sea. One of the earliest pieces of artwork we have from the early Greeks is this vase. And the reason that it's interesting is this little bit of decoration on it. We have pottery like this because it's lasted, whereas paintings or other types of carved artwork, in wood especially, would have deteriorated by this time and decomposed. Now let's take another look at a close-up of this. You'll notice here an awful lot of similarity between this sort of style of rather stiff people at a funeral. They're all wailing. The person who's died is here on this bier, and this is a lot of mourning going on. Rather stiff poses, very tiny of course, but aside from the very intricate pattern work here on this vase, these human figures are represented in a way that's reminiscent of the Egyptians. And this statuary from the same period, here around 600 BC, you'll see it's not quite like the Egyptians, but a very rigid pose, and the same sort of a look on the face, looking straight ahead. And although there's an attempt here, a very good attempt at the shape of the legs, the knees are sort of crudely done. It looks as if this has a lot of its origins in the style of the Egyptians. Now, not very much later though, here, 540 BC, we see this type of pottery and a rather different style emerging. A lot of differences here. First of all, the figures here are quite relaxed. They're not doing a formal thing. They're sort of playing a game. They're very much at ease. The position of the legs here, it isn't as if both legs have to be shown in their entirety. This is a side view, and it looks much more as if your eyes were seeing this from a particular position. So the point here is actually to depict the scene as seen by a person with their own eyes, rather than trying to present as much information as possible. And of course, this is because the Greeks didn't have the same religion as the Egyptians. They didn't have the same feeling that to carry on in the afterlife, you had to show the person and as much information about them, distorting the shape of the body in order to do that. Now, this is a very important piece here a little bit later, about 500 BC, and the reason for it is this marks a significant departure, a very obvious significant departure from the art that was inherited from the Egyptians. The key element of this, which is a scene of a warrior strapping on his armor, perhaps his parents are helping him do this, the key element is right here in this foot. You'll notice this foot is shown, this leg is shown with the foot extended, the inside, perhaps you would say that's the most information, but this foot is shown end on. It's what's called foreshortened. Here the toes are just little circles. So this is very much as you would see it if a person were standing in that position. It's not the way that you present the most information about this. In a similar way, take a look at this object, which is actually a circular shield, but you're seeing it inside view. And you're seeing that it has a face on it. You're not seeing the face on. If this were drawn in the style of the Egyptians to portray the most information, you would see it as a circle. You would see it face on. But here it's shown foreshortened as well. So keep this in mind. The Greeks were using their eyes. They weren't picturing images from imagination, knowing how they should look. Think about that pond the Egyptians showed from the top and the sides of the animals and the sides of the trees. That and this are radically different in terms of style. Gombrich has entitled this chapter The Great Awakening, because here a whole different idea of art is taking shape. Now, a different idea of architecture is taking shape also. Here we see the Parthenon on the hill named the Acropolis in Greece. This was actually a temple. It's been ravaged by time, and it's been ravaged by wars that have been fought in the area. Some of it has been reconstructed, and some of it, the stones are still just in a jumble down here. The proportions of this are very eye-pleasing. The way the columns look as if they're actually kind of organic. They are fatter here than at the top, almost as if they're sort of buckling a bit under the weight. They're spaced close together here because the Greeks learned probably the hard way that stone isn't strong enough to span much more of a distance than this because it's so heavy and it's rather brittle. A number of things about the architecture of the Greeks is considered very great. Consider that you'll still see many buildings, even here in Chicago, and government buildings and buildings that want to look like they have some dignity, follow exactly this same sort of a form of having these columns closely spaced, steps leading up to them, a roof like this that has this sort of a frieze to it, and then a triangular roof that looks something like that. This is a copy of a statue that would have been in the Parthenon. This is Athena, the primary Greek goddess. The actual statue that this is a copy of would have been about 35 feet tall, made of wood and covered with gold leaf. It's long since been destroyed. This statue is a copy, much as people today put copies of statues of saints and various holy figures in their homes. This would have been the same thing that would have been done with a copy like this. Now, interestingly, here's something about Greek sculpture. We see it as if it's in this dignified white, but you will be seeing some examples in the next unit and in readings associated with the next unit that show you that the Greeks actually colored this in a major way. They colored the faces, face colors, they colored the clothing, they colored the flesh here, they colored the decorations, the dresses. If you saw this in the way that the Greeks of the Greek age saw it, it wouldn't look like this, and you might think it was kind of garish because of the colors applied to it. But what we're seeing here is actually statuary that the paint has worn off. And it's not the way the Greeks would have seen it, although that's the only way we see Greek statuary these days. Here is a piece of a frieze. It's a fragment of a decoration for a building. So it was applied as decoration to a wall, but the thing that I'd like for you to look at here is how the Greeks are beginning to perfect this idea of the shape of the human body. Here we have Hercules carrying the heavens. It's a man's body. The curves on the body, the way the muscles stick out, the way the muscles stick out of the arms. This is very lifelike. You can't do this from imagination. The Greeks would have had models standing here doing this in order to capture this sort of appearance. And look at here at this female figure. Look at in particular the hint of the leg here, the hint of the way the leg is shaped and the drapery of this cloth. This is very elegant. This is very, very hard to do and get it to look convincing, the way the draping here of the sleeve. This would have had to have been done with a person standing there doing this so that the sculpture could have taken this and this very fine, subtle effect here of seeing the shape of the human body under the draped cloth. This is what makes Greek art really outstanding in terms of the accomplishments that the Greeks made this early in history.